Hi, everyone. If you're receiving this video, it's because you couldn't join us for our General Assembly, which was just last week. Now, we had a little hiccup in that, totally my fault. I forgot to hit record for the very beginning of the presentation. So I'm going to give my slides and then I'll stitch it together with the actual recording of the call. And that's what I'm sharing with you tonight. So bear with me for this retake, if you will. But I'm excited to tell you about what we have going on at Cornell Free Speech Alliance this semester. So, we're going to go through some national policy shifts we've seen on the macro level. We're going to talk about Cornell and their federal scrutiny, the victories we've had since the last meeting, next steps and strategic initiatives, and a member call to action. And just a reminder, our group is a coalition of alumni, faculty, friends of Cornell who care deeply about protecting free expression, viewpoint diversity, and academic freedom at our alma mater. We are totally independent and nonpartisan. We have supporters across the political spectrum. And being a free speech organization, we love hearing everyone's opinion. So we would love to get your feedback based on what you see in this presentation, because we want Cornell to be a place where you can ask these honest questions and challenge prevailing ideas, whether those ideas are conservative, progressive, or anything else, and not fear social or professional retaliation for good faith speech. So we know what the groupthink is and the monoculture on campus. We know who the outside perspectives are, but we are advocating for free speech on a whole. So tonight we're going to share what we're seeing on campus, explaining what CFSA actually does, and talking about how you can help us create that culture of open inquiry. National policy shifts. So the campus at Cornell is in a really interesting moment in history. And that is that on the federal level, the Trump administration is taking a close look at higher education. So, a key development was this August 7th, 2025 White House memorandum, and it tightens how universities report admissions data. There's an IPEDS overhaul. It's coming with clearer, more granular admissions statistics requirements and limits on using racial proxies on ways that obscure what's really happening. So, racial proxies, what does that mean? In the fair admissions case at the Supreme Court, where Harvard was sued for being discriminatory against Asian American students or Asian students in general, there passed, that reformed how we do our admissions, and that there was no longer the checkbox of what race you are. Now, what Cornell did was add a supplement question to their common application that says some people would feel like their application was incomplete if they did not talk about their race or country of origin. If that's you, please, submit a supplement essay. So they're still using race as a factor for admission. Now in 2025, 2026, because of this memo, there'll be more public reporting. And what does that mean? There'll be penalties for missing and inaccurate data. And for CFSA, this isn't about partisan stance. It's about transparency and accountability, because better data lets us see whether Cornell's holistic admissions practices are genuinely fair and merit-based, or whether there are hidden biases in any direction. In other words, the conversation switches from feelings to facts, which we love to see. University policy shifts. So President Kotlikoff established a presidential task force on institutional voice. That's a big rethink of one of their core principles. And this group is thinking about, when should Cornell as an institution speak on political or social issues? When should the university remain neutral and let the community debate? This is extremely encouraging, because we've long argued that institutional neutrality protects all viewpoints, left, right, and everything in between. By letting individuals speak freely while the institution itself avoids becoming a political actor, that is the first step towards curbing politicized university speech, and it opens a door for thoughtful alumni input. They are taking feedback, and we have submitted feedback as well as released it to all of you on our listserv that notes our favorite documents: the Calvin Report, the Chicago Principles, the Dartmouth Approach, everything that urges restraint in institutional political speech. Also, on the university side, another committee was established called the Committee on the Future of the American University. So, this is a faculty led rethink of Cornell's role in changing the higher education landscape focusing on trust, cost, access, bias, and the impact of AI seems to be a pretty critical component they're discussing. Now, they're holding these campus town halls, they're soliciting broad community input, and their goal is to come up with long term recommendations on learning, research, and public engagement. So, we are going to provide input as part of the Cornell community. And this matters to CFSA because the establishment of this committee creates room for reform and open inquiry. It's an opportunity to raise the issues we care about: viewpoint diversity, transparency in decision making, and a renewed focus on merit. We would love to see the Dean's List come back. Let's recognize students for academic achievement. That would be awesome. The fact that Cornell is explicitly acknowledging that there's falling public trust in higher education is also significant. Our hope is that free expression and ideological balance will be part of how that trust is rebuilt. So, graduation. To put all of this in context, think about the students who graduated last May. They spent some of their most formative years, as we all did, on campus, but their campus was shaped by intense political currents, pandemic disruption, and social media pressure. So the question for all of us alumni is, what kind of environment are we sending the next graduating classes into? And that leads us into the next section, which is Cornell is now under a federal and public spotlight in ways that directly touch these core questions of fairness and free expression. Um, Tony is going to go through these, and I will cut over to him as soon as that video picks up from the Zoom recording. So the first thing he'll talk about is the AFPI civil rights complaint. This alleges systemic discrimination at Cornell. And if you haven't already looked at the Chris Rufo tweets about this, it is worth a read. They leaked just open documents that say that only people of a certain skin color and race will be considered for a position. And then when faculty members express discouragement that the candidate they've identified isn't yet qualified for that position, they say it doesn't matter, we need a diversity hire. That is a pretty that is a smoking gun as far as these things go. And federal agencies are paying close attention to Cornell. So AFPI took this and ran with it, filed a complaint with the DOJ, and we'll see how that case pans out. It is still pending despite the Cornell Trump settlement because it is an EEOC complaint, so it doesn't fall under what was already closed. The second one is that Cornell has rebranded its DEI office, seemingly to retain its signature monogram. It is now called the Academic Diversity and Impact Office instead of the Academic Diversity Initiatives Office. This is likely in response to pressure. We question the substance. Bill Jacobson has thoughts on that. Read our most recent newsletter. Cornell in the spotlight. Huge money has been spent on marketing, both with Don McGahn and Jeff Miller and other known conservative lobbyists. This obviously had a very positive effect for Cornell in the settlement, but it is interesting seeing them allocate budget this way. And then there's some new leadership at the top. So CFSA would love to reach out, and we intend to welcome Mr. Campbell, who's the new vice president for university relations. We're really hopeful that his tenure will bring a new dynamic to what we do. And Cornell in the spotlight is not only federal, it's also local and it's symbolic. So in New York, recently elected Assembly member Zohran Mamdani, soon to be the mayor, threatened to shut down Cornell's Roosevelt Island campus. He's previously called for a boycott over Cornell Tech's collaboration with Technion, citing ties to the state of Israel. And whatever your politics on that issue, it's just a striking example of how external political actors can target universities and constrain academic partnerships. Meanwhile, in Ithaca, Hannah Schvetz, a Cornell sophomore and a member of the Communist Party of the United States, has been elected to the Ithaca Common Council. She has endorsements from groups like the Democratic Socialists of America and the Ithaca Tenants Union, and we're not attacking or endorsing her views here. The point is, Cornell lives in an environment where very strong ideological commitments on all sides, but mostly on one side, are shaping local power and culture. And this makes it even more important that the university itself be a place where all ideas can be debated openly, because If socialism is mainstream, imagine expressing a viewpoint to the right of that. Okay, two more things that I want to share. The Roosevelt Island controversy continues to draw attention, but there's another major narrative, and the federal Cornell deal and how it affects DEI. Law professor Bill Jacobson recently wrote in the New York Post. Oh, hold on, that's on the next slide. This slide is the graduate student union who's suing over the mandatory dues because they often go towards political events that don't represent their viewpoints. And then also the Cornell deal, which we will get into more. But I want to highlight my favorite article on the Cornell deal, which is Bill Jacobson, Cornell law professor, um, and quote, the youngest conservative professor on campus, and I'm in my 60s. So we love Bill. He is a national treasure. He is not afraid to speak his mind, and we just love people that think differently. And he wrote this great piece in the New York Post last week called Trump's Cornell University Deal Leaves a Zombie DEI Agenda Ready to Rise from the Dead. So if that's of interest to you, go there, comment, like, give him lots of impressions so that the New York Post continues to publish Bill's unorthodox thinking. And then CFSA updates. So, where does CFSA fit into all this? And this is where I'm going to pass it to Tony, but we are already seeing visible adjustments by Cornell. So, long story short, the national attention on Cornell is in many ways validating our thesis. Our concerns are being amplified, our reform agenda is being listened to, and our interactions with the president, the board of trustees, et cetera, have all increased. So, there's more opportunities for meaningful engagement than ever before. And we are clear eyed about this. These are early moves, not final victories. And there's so much to do. So, with that, I will stitch these two videos together. You will hear from Tony and the rest of the team. And we really hope you can join us for the next General Assembly meeting.
Later in this presentation. Am I still on?
Right,
Yes,
you're
you're
still on.
fine.
I forgot to hit record in the beginning, and I know a few people that missed it wanted to catch this. So, Tony,
Okay.
carry on. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, so we want to take a more constructive approach to Cornell, and we've had some interaction with emeritus board of trustee members, several of them, and we're hoping to have more opportunities for more engagement with emeritus board of trustees and maybe even current trustees in the future. Next slide, Rachel. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Cornell government agreement. So dollar-wise, it's $60 million deal. You might have read about this in the papers. It came out last week. It's a $30 million penalty that Cornell pays to the federal government, which that'll just get lost. I don't know where that's going to go, what good it's going to do, but it's a penalty. They've also agreed to invest $30 million in to fund agricultural research, which I would imagine they were going to do anyway. But in return for that, the feds released $250 million in research funding that had been frozen, which is very good for Cornell. Cornell was under intense financial pressure. Cornell's had to provide anonymized admissions data by race and all kinds of statistics. And now I'm not sure how that relates to the August 7th memo that Rachel just mentioned, but this is to be submitted to the federal government and presumably for the purpose of verifying that Cornell's in continuous compliance with Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard decision. And Cornell also has to hold annual climate surveys to gauge the atmosphere on campus with particular emphasis on trying to combat the anti-Semitism that's been on campus the last year or so. Well, more than the last couple of years. It's effective through 2028, and President Kolikoff has to sign off on compliance with it under penalty of perjury. So there's no financial penalties that I see in this agreement if Cornell doesn't comply, but there's a personal commitment by President Kolikoff. Next slide, please. So, CFSC, we debate these things. We have different opinions on it. I would say as a group, we have mixed feelings on whether the Fed should have withheld the funds and whether they should be inserting themselves into campus governance. But once they did it did help our agenda. So we just figured we'd sit back and see what happened. It does help boost transparency for CFSA for our accountability goals. The admissions reports will be subject to FOIA requests, so it is, information furnished to the government that could be available if needed. Most importantly, with the agreement, the financial pressure is off Cornell, so CFSA can go back to pushing reforms and hopefully get some attention now from the Cornell administration now that the financial pressure's off. So mixed bag. We haven't finished reviewing the agreement in detail, but we think it's okay, I would say.
Yeah.
Art, I think that you're
Yeah,
next.
who's
Mama.
Rachel? We need a new slide, I think.
Dave.
No,
No, this is it.
got it.
You want to take that, Art, or you want me to?
Well, go ahead, David, and I'll pick it up in a little bit.
Well, it's, either way, it's the Board of Trustees is key to everything that will happen and does happen on campus. And our objective is to work with the Board of Trustees, not against them. We want to make Cornell the leader of the Ivy League, and I think we can. Cornell is positioned well now with an agreement that is to some extent favorable to Cornell that they have with the federal government, and gives Cornell an opportunity to really become a leader. And Art has been instrumental in helping us initiate a dialogue with past members of the Board of Trustees and looking toward the future members of the Board of Trustees and trying to work with them to get some outside opinion into the campus, because they're under a great deal of pressure from the students on campus, the professors on campus. We want to show them that there's a large body outside the university of people who really care, alums. And we really do care about the university. And we want to work with them and help them find a way to make Cornell the leader of the Ivy League and focus on what the school should be focused on: advancing knowledge and educating students, not a political agenda. AFPI, that's the America First Policy Institute, which we breezed by a little earlier. How did they come about filing their litigation? Well, they developed and found detailed actual documentation from Cornell emails and communications at Cornell that linked DEI discrimination in jobs and financial aid. That there were people who were barred from hiring opportunities because of race or sex. That there were ideology checks that professors, to become a professor, had to fill and file diversity statements that were supporting political policies having nothing to do with the courses they were teaching. We want to encourage them to get focused back, and it looks like AFPI has found that Cornell was not focused in the right direction. And I think there's an opportunity to sort of help Cornell understand how to deal with these AFPI litigations, because we don't want to see Cornell lose litigation. We want to see Cornell become even more successful than its history. Next. The question here is, can Cornell really do it? Can Cornell turn its admissions into a merit-based admissions system? And do we understand what merit really is? Merit is based on what an individual has accomplished, has shown an interest in, and demonstrated that they have proficiency or interest in some area. Not that they belong to some racial group or ideology group. That's not an accomplishment, and that's not merit-based. And that's all we're looking for. We don't want Cornell to be in headlines like this headline that you see, where a potential student who could have contributed to Cornell was rejected out of hand not because of his accomplishments, but because of some affiliation he had with a racial group. That's just not right. I know we'll have a lot of problems with people who have legacy issues, and that's another issue that Cornell has to deal with. How do we deal with legacies? And I know we'll find mixed emotions from the group that's on this call in that issue. Anti-Semitism. It's been a big issue on many campuses, but a significant issue at Cornell. And what's most disturbing is look at that front page of the Cornell Daily Sun. That's not appropriate for a university newspaper to be so politicized and to create hate on campus, where in fact a student feared for his life, and there's another student who's in jail now for threatening this student, threatening to kill him. So this is an important issue to make Cornell a comfortable place for everybody, not just Jewish students, but Palestinian students, Arab students, students of all backgrounds should feel comfortable and safe and not have an environment where they're having to defend their very existence based on a group they belong to rather than their own individual merit.
Okay. I think this is mine, David.
Yep.
Yeah, next steps. I want to start out by saying I'm going to echo a lot of the information that was shared earlier. And to date, if you think about CFSA, we've been sort of a news outlet. We collect, analyze, and publish information about what's going on campus to a fairly targeted audience. I think what's underway right now is to try to change that role by expanding it into the areas that others have kind of identified, that we want to work with the administration. We want to find projects that we can effectively actively engage with. From a CFSA perspective, there's actually a potential trust issue that engagement would help resolve. And that is, if you change the name of the organization but do the same things, you haven't made any change. So can we get involved in looking at the many activities that are going on, or at least start with some selective ones and start to provide direct input and direct engagement in what's happening? As mentioned, it's underway. Cindy Crawford and I are talking regularly with a person that is a former trustee and is very active still. And we're getting a fair amount of feedback with the objective of trying to identify initial projects that we can get started with. And we're getting very encouraging feedback. Go ahead to the next slide. I mean, this is a list. Some of the things we're asking, and this is an example of some of the questions we have about how existing policies have had unintended consequences. And effectively, the chart on the left is thinking, if you think of the x-axis as a family income, and you think about the y-axis as being the number of people in the population with that income, we believe it's sort of a normal curve. It may have a bigger tail, it may be a slightly different distribution, but the policies that have been going on at Cornell from an admission standpoint, which is not unique to the university, but a fair amount of the existing tuition is actually allocated to provide financial aid to other students. So it's one of the factors that inflates tuition for everybody as a way to offset and bring in others. Now, I think we all want a diverse community, but the concern that's out there is we may be creating something of a barbell where you get a higher percentage than normal in the very high income categories and a higher percentage than normal in the lower income categories. But the middle income are going other places because they're the ones that are absorbing debt, making other kinds of decisions, and going to other schools. And, we'd like to understand that. Go ahead. As many of you know, we did get involved in the trustee elections last year, culminating this February. We are still planning to stay active in that space. We would be looking to start something as early as this coming spring. We're anticipating that the trustee candidates will probably go through the nomination that's called the petition process, rather than the normal process Cornell uses to make sure, which is called the Cornell Alumni Trustee Nominating Committee. In that basis, we can communicate to the alumni using our database about any candidates really up until the time in July that it's clear that they've made the ballot. So we have the opportunity to start to build, first we have to identify, we think Cindy and Ken are interested in running again. I'm not sure of that, but I think so. But we can identify other candidates as well. And we want to start by building network support again early next year. And then we want to begin publishing thought leaderships with them in some of the materials that we're sending out, and building up in terms of the communication. Ideally, I'm going to go back to the top. We want to prepare questions, interview all the candidates that are endorsed. It's unclear whether that would be permitted, but that's definitely something you'll see in the very near future. All right, thank you. CFSA is planning a retreat that would be in the spring of 2026 in Washington, D.C. That gives us access to some of the legal and governmental affairs people that we've been interacting with. And it gives us the opportunity to bring what we think is a small group together to plan sustained pressure campaigns for both Cornell administration and federal government. Ideally, by then, we will have identified projects that we are doing with the university. And on that basis, we'd be able to talk through progress and issues with that as well and add that to the agenda. Thank you. As mentioned earlier, some of our communications have slowed down. I think that was more of an interim for a variety of different reasons, but we are definitely launching student and alumni target social media sites. I think Facebook has already launched. We would like to secure a Daily Sun op-ed type placement, and ideally we start to publish material as an ad if we needed to start to counterbalance some of the information that's being published daily in the Sun. I don't know how many of you are looking at it, but it is, as alluded by others, pretty amazing, some of the arguments they're trying to make. Obviously, our site and some of our media partners, and that would include Legal Insurrection. I think many of you are familiar with that group. We've already mentioned Bill Jacobson. We are looking to expand the on-campus presence, ideally hiring an on-campus intern, someone that's giving us more direct feedback on what's happening. Next slide, Rachel. Where do we want to be? And ideally, I mean, you've heard the terms already. We want it to be a non-political environment because right now politics are driving a lot of what is happening on campus. And that's a real risk long-term for Cornell. I think what we'd like to get to is an environment where the standards are driving it, are driving a lot of the decision-making and a lot of the policies and are being enforced properly. And in that way, you're reestablishing the ivory tower where no matter how politics change, Cornell's core values, which I think they're having trouble meeting these days, are being met. And Cornell is, in a way, above the political discussion. Yet, we want active debate, unafraid of debate of any type. We want the organizations and the people on campus to understand that that is healthy, not a negative. Obviously, through debate, you're typically learning and coming to a point where you can decide truth from many different angles, which is important rather than my truth. The principles, the core principles at Cornell are fine. It's the politics that are the problem. So again, reestablishing. And finally, the end result is to graduate independent thinkers in every field that are capable of challenging and effectively changing what is happening in our greater world. Rachel, I think at this point I turn it back to you.
I think Ken, are you on the
Oh,
line?
Ken, I'm sorry.
So, how did we get there? I guess I have the role of being the resident historian for CFSA. Um, it's actually pretty amazing if, for those of you that have been hearing from us for the past couple of years, it was 4 years ago that we were founded with only 3 members and had the audacity to write a letter to Martha Pollack, then the president, who, much to my surprise, thanked us for the letter and wished us the best of luck because we wanted to be supportive of the university. And about a week, maybe it was 10 days later, she had Cornell's general counsel calling us to accuse us of intellectual property violations. And on multiple occasions, attempting to literally have us cease and desist or perhaps go out of business because we were a bit of an annoyance. The interesting thing to me is that we started with only a few members. We had very little money, but we had a belief that Cornell was moving in the wrong direction in terms of freedom of speech and viewpoint diversity and academic freedom. And what we've discovered over the past few years is that just communicating with alumni alone was an important pillar, but not the only way to affect change at the university. We began communicating with various leaders in the media. People mentioned Wall Street Journal articles, New York Post, Cornell Fix, a variety of others. We were not so much due to us, but due to the changing times. There's been tremendous activity from the federal government, and as a result, there's been pressure through legal means, through the courts. Our alumni group, we now communicate with over 100,000 Cornell alumni on a semi-regular basis. There was a time where the Board of Trustees were asked not to interact with us at all. I'm not sure if that was because we did not merit being interacted with, or there was a concern that we had too much influence or a growing influence. That has now changed. As you heard a few minutes ago, we are having some dialogue, and I think it's mostly positive dialogue with various individuals who are either currently or in the past affiliated with the Board of Trustees. And all of these things create a community of efforts that I think really has helped CFSA become more influential. You can go to the next slide. So we still need help. You're hearing from some of our most active members. And as I said, we have about 100,000 people that we're communicating with regularly. Many of you on this call have donated money to CFSA, which has been extremely helpful in building our membership list and hiring expertise to help us work with Cornell administration. I would say that, have we made progress? I think we have a lot to be proud of, and you've heard some of it already this evening. But is there more to do? Absolutely. It's actually a little hard to imagine that many of the same individuals and faculty members and administrators that that we were on opposite sides of the table from for the past few years are seemingly willing to work with us jointly to improve the situation at Cornell, but you can never have enough support. We're going to have a retreat next year. We'd love for every one of you to visit at that retreat in Washington, D.C. We need volunteers with skills. You know, we have whatever skills we have are limited. And if you have a unique skill, be it contacts or technical abilities, we would very much like your help for CFSA. And then lastly, we haven't reached out for financing during the past year because there were really governmental agencies that had taken the lead role in what we were trying to do in the past, but that won't always be there. And we think having some professional help associated with our cadre of volunteers would be very beneficial. Next slide. So I know we've been talking now for about 35 minutes, and some of you may have questions, and we'd like to open the floor for that and for your ideas.
Hey, Ken,
Yes.
Carl, can I just throw a couple things out to the group?
Sure.
I just, as an observer, I'm not sure. I want to make it crystal clear to everyone watching and involved. The impact of this organization, as Ken said, has been huge. Our speakers are very modest, I think, in terms of what they've presented. I just want to mention 6 things to you. So everyone is aware, crystal clear on what the impact of CFSA has been. We believe we came to the conclusion that Martha Pollack was not the right person to lead Cornell at the time that she did. She's a great person, but we were instrumental in bringing pressure on Martha Pollack, and I think the change and some major donors that were recruited by CFSA helped to bring needed change and leadership, and we had a very large role in that. Secondly, there is now a Heterodox Academy, which is an organization of faculty members that have been formed at Cornell. So it's HXA Cornell. CFSA founded that group with their own capital on our own events. And now they've spun out, and they're a very vital group of faculty who are organizing around these same issues at Cornell. And they're growing stronger, and they're getting a larger and larger voice on campus for these issues. And we were instrumental in making that happen. Was mentioned the EEOC lawsuit that has brought a lot of attention, the Chris Rufo stuff. What wasn't mentioned is we have been embedded so deeply into Cornell. We worked for 2 years to get a faculty member who basically shared the information about discriminatory hiring practices among faculty hiring efforts. And it took us 2 years to build a faculty member up to have the courage to blow the whistle on that thing. And then that, of course, has turned into a big impact with both the Department of Justice, EEOC, Department of Education, and was a big part of, I think, a contributor to some of the pressure, to the focus the federal government has put on Cornell as their short list of key universities they want to influence. The other thing is that, and Rachel's been a big part of this, others, we have some legal help in Washington. CFSA has great influence and impact for the type of organization we have on the very top levels of the U.S. government. The agency leads that are involved, even in the White House and so forth. Not that we endorse everything the White House does, but we have their ear, and they are very aware of us and our efforts. So that has been very important. Couple last things. Some of you may know of AFSA, which is the national organization. CFSA was a founding member of the national organization of groups like this around the country. There's now, I think, over 30 universities that have groups like ours. we were one of the 5 founding members, and I believe that people at AFSA would say Cornell is the leading alumni group that is bringing these changes to not only our universities but other universities. And we're very proud of our role there. We sit on the board and do that. And the last thing I would say, as Art said, I think all of this, as Ken said, initially we were given sort of the cold shoulder by the university, but that has, 3 years later, the university has approached us to engage with them, the board of trustees, to try to make constructive change, which Art and Cindy are leading. And what a huge change from 3 years ago. Now, the board of trustees wants to engage with us, and that's part of what we're saying. The shift that we've made to try to be more constructive rather than critical going forward. And so that's a huge open door for us that Art and Cindy are trying to capitalize on. So I'm not involved in as much anymore, but for my own self, this is at the very top of my list in terms of what our year end of donations is going to go to. And this organization not only has great ideas, but it's also become an organization of great impact along all those dimensions I just mentioned and others. So I want to thank everyone on the call who made the presentation for everything you've done.